The woods were supposed to be quiet, an escape from the constant hum of thought. But the deeper I went, the louder everything became. Wind hissed between the branches like a whisper that almost knew my name. Leaves crackled underfoot, damp and dark, and the air tasted faintly metallic, as if it had remembered blood. I stopped when I saw it. A tree, thicker than a car, its bark split where something sharp had carved my full name. Fresh, glistening cuts that hadn't even dried. Beneath it, a smear of red, pooled and seeping into the roots. The world seemed to narrow until only that tree existed, breathing, waiting. I wanted to run, but something heavier held me there, a feeling that the forest had been expecting me all along, that the blood wasn't just a warning. It was a beginning. He told himself it had to be a prank, someone following him, watching from the trees. But who would know he came here? The air grew colder, the wind sharper. The forest creaked like a house settling under weight. He knelt by the blood, its wet gleam too fresh to ignore. His reflection wavered in it for a second. Then another image flickered there, something behind him, something tall and motionless. He turned, heart pounding against his ribs, but saw only empty trunks and fog. Yet the silence that followed was no longer natural. It felt deliberate, waiting, holding its breath along with him. The tree seemed older now, as if it had aged a decade in seconds. Bark warped, roots curling like veins beneath the dirt. He pressed his hand against it, warm. The warmth traveled into his palm, up his arm, a pulsing throb that wasn't his heartbeat. He staggered back, chest tight, and something in the distance echoed, a low groan. Neither human nor animal. When he shone his flashlight that way, the beam caught another tree. This one carved too, but the letters were smudged, incomplete. Whatever they once said, they'd been scratched away violently, as if to erase a name that never should have been there. He tried to call out, his voice lost in the fog. The forest swallowed sound like water taking light. Then he saw it, faint footprints in the dirt, leading away from the bloody tree. Barefoot! Small, he followed, each step heavier than the last, the path winding deeper into shadows that looked alive. The further he went, the quieter it became, until even his own breathing seemed intrusive. He could sense it, something ahead, waiting just beyond the reach of his flashlight. When the beam finally caught movement, it wasn't a person. It was the forest itself, shifting. A whisper came from ahead, faint but unmistakable. A voice calling his name in his own tone. The sound rose from the ground, from the trees, from everywhere. He turned back toward the path, but it was gone, erased by fog. Only the bloody tree remained behind him, glowing faintly as though alive. Then another sound, a heartbeat, echoing through the earth. The forest pulsed once, twice, in rhythm with his chest, and when he blinked for a heartbeat too long, something stood beside the tree, watching him, wearing his face. The duplicate stood perfectly still, eyes gleaming faintly in the fog, as if lit from within. For a long, trembling second, neither moved. Then the figure smiled, a small, deliberate curve that didn't reach its eyes. Evan's mind refused to connect the sight with reason. His body wanted to run, yet his feet stayed, locked in place. The other Evan raised a hand, palm upward, and the blood on the ground began to ripple toward him, threading through the roots like veins alive beneath the soil. The forest exhaled once, a low gust that carried whispers, almost chanting. When Evan blinked, the double was gone, but the blood trail led deeper into the trees, pulsing faintly as though inviting him to follow. He moved without deciding to, flashlight trembling as its beam cut through the fog. Every tree looked the same now, each trunk slick with dew, each shadow shaped like something watching. The trail beneath him darkened into mud streaked with red, footprints forming where none had been. He felt an ache in his chest, as though something old and heavy was waking inside him, remembering. His name echoed faintly, whispered from different directions at once, each voice slightly off from his own. The forest wasn't following him, it was guiding him, folding inward, closing its circle. At a clearing, he found something that made his breath catch. A circle of stones, each carved with the same letters as his name, some half-buried, others split apart. In the center, a pool of water reflected the canopy above, but no reflection of him appeared. The realization crawled through his nerves like cold fire. He knelt beside it, searching for reason, for proof of anything human here. But the water's surface rippled, and another face appeared. His again, though wrong. Too calm, too knowing. It smiled at him before the reflection's lips moved silently, forming a word he couldn't hear but somehow understood. Return. He stumbled back from the pool, heart pounding, hands shaking uncontrollably. His flashlight flickered again, casting warped shadows across the stones. One by one, the carvings began to bleed, not red, but a dark sap that gleamed under the light like oil. His name shimmered in each one, alive, crawling slowly as if being rewritten. A rustling sound grew behind him, branches groaning, leaves twisting together. He turned, expecting the double again, but saw only the tree line, the shapes between them shifting like breath. He could feel it now. The woods weren't haunted. They were remembering him. The air grew thicker, as though the forest had drawn closer. Every sound, the creak of bark, the hum of wind, merged into one deep vibration that seemed to move through his chest. He ran, branches clawing at his jacket, but no matter which way he turned, the bloody tree loomed ahead again, impossibly near. The carving, still fresh, the blood, still wet. He fell to his knees before it, gasping, desperate for air that didn't taste of iron. Then he heard it. His own voice behind him, calm and steady. You shouldn't have come back. When he turned, the other him was smiling again, but this time it held something in its hand, something sharp, dripping red. The blade glinted dully in the mist, catching stray fragments of light that shouldn't have existed here. Evan stared at it, then at the face holding it, his own, calm and unblinking. There was no malice in that expression, only purpose. The forest seemed to shrink around them, drawing in its breath, every branch bending slightly toward the scene. Evan rose slowly, every motion deliberate, the earth shifting beneath him as if pushing him toward his double. "What do you want?" he asked, but his voice came out hollow, thinner than fog. The other Evan tilted his head, and for a heartbeat, both spoke the same word at once. Remember. Then the double lunged. The struggle was silent except for the muffled thud of boots against soft earth. Evan grasped his attacker's arm, feeling the coldness of skin that matched his own. Their movements mirrored perfectly, every strike and block like an echo. The knife sliced the air between them, catching threads of fog that twisted into strange patterns. When the blade grazed his shoulder, the wound burned but didn't bleed red. It oozed the same dark sap that seeped from the stones. He stumbled backward, realizing the forest had taken something from him already, something vital. His double stepped closer, blade trembling, eyes hollow, but resolute, as if performing a duty long overdue. He tore himself free and ran, crashing through the undergrowth. Branches whipped across his face, stinging but real, grounding him in pain. The forest moved with him, paths twisting, roots shifting like muscle under skin. His lungs burned. He didn't know where he was heading, only that he had to escape his reflection. But the whispers grew louder now, merging into his own thoughts, replacing them. You can't run from yourself. He tripped over a root, hitting the ground hard, his flashlight spinning away. When it landed, its beam revealed dozens of trees ahead, each carved with his name, each bleeding. He crawled forward, chest heaving, drawn to one tree among the hundreds. The largest, its bark ancient and cracked like an old scar. The letters of his name shimmered there, but beneath them, another word had begun to form. Letters carving themselves into the bark as he watched, his vision blurred. The forest seemed to breathe through him now, pulling his heartbeat into its rhythm. Then, from behind, footsteps, slow, even. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. His double shadow stretched long beside his own, the knife's edge glinting faintly. "It's always been you," the voice said softly. He turned to face himself, exhaustion replacing fear. "If this ends here," he whispered, "then it ends with me." The double paused, expression softening just enough to seem almost human again. Then, without warning, it drove the knife into the tree instead of him. A deep groan rolled through the forest, the ground trembling as if something vast beneath the soil had awakened. The air flashed red for a second, like light through blood. Evan fell back, covering his face, as the carvings across every tree began to glow, erasing themselves one by one. When the light faded, he was alone again. No double, no blood, only silence. But deep beneath the roots, something whispered his name once more, unfinished. The forest had fallen into an impossible stillness. No wind, no sound, only the faint tremor of something vast withdrawing beneath the soil. Evan's breath fogged in short bursts as he stared at the tree. Its carvings gone, the bark smooth as untouched skin. The knife lay at its base, clean as though never used. He reached for it, but the metal burned cold, leaving a pale mark across his palm. Somewhere distant, a single crow called once, breaking the silence. He realized then the path behind him had vanished. In every direction, the same pale trunks stretched endlessly, forming a maze with no center. He whispered his name, and the forest whispered it back. He wandered for what felt like hours, though the light never changed. His footprints dissolved moments after he made them, the ground swallowing each trace. The silence pressed down like weight on his chest until he could almost hear his own thoughts echoing off the trees. But then, footsteps, faint, following his own rhythm. He stopped. They stopped. When he turned, there was nothing, only the fog rippling as if disturbed by something unseen. He began to walk faster, his pulse sensing with the phantom steps. The forest's quiet wasn't empty. It was listening. The footsteps grew louder until they no longer sounded behind him. They were beside him. He turned his head slowly and saw a flicker of movement just within the fog. A figure walked parallel to him, blurred by distance and haze. It looked human, but its gait was wrong, its arms too still. Evan called out, his voice breaking the hush like glass. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it turned its head slightly toward him, and though he couldn't see its face, he knew it was smiling. Panic surged. He broke into a run, the forest shifting with him, every tree seeming to turn as he passed. He ran until his lungs burned, until the forest blurred into streaks of gray and black. Finally, he stumbled into another clearing, the same one, he realized with dread. The ancient oak stood before him again, unscarred, yet familiar. The knife still lay where he'd left it, but now the soil around it pulsed faintly, with a heartbeat rhythm. He picked it up, ignoring the cold pain that spread up his arm. Beneath the fog, he heard whispers rising again, hundreds of voices layered into one, all saying the same word. Dig. He fell to his knees, hands trembling, and began to claw at the earth. His fingers hit something solid, a surface rough like bark, but hollow underneath. He dug faster, uncovering what looked like another tree buried horizontally, its trunk split open like a wound. Inside lay shapes wrapped in roots, tangled and still. When he brushed away the dirt, he saw faces. His own, over and over, each one lifeless, preserved in the wood like growth rings of himself. His breath caught. The knife slipped from his hand, landing among the others. A faint sound came from deep inside the buried tree, a whisper shaped like his voice. Then one of the faces opened its eyes. The forest held its breath as the eyes inside the roots blinked open. Evan stumbled backward, choking on air too thick to swallow. Each face twitched beneath the bark, half living, half trapped, mouths moving soundlessly as though remembering words from forgotten dreams. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. The soil beneath him pulsed like a living lung, the heartbeat now deafening. His flashlight flickered, then died, leaving only the faint bioluminescent glow from within the hollow tree. The faces began to merge, the wood twisting and closing over them, sealing shut again with a wet sigh. The silence that followed felt like a held exhale, and from deep within a voice whispered, not around him this time, but inside his mind. "You are the last one." He fell to his knees, clutching his head. The whisper grew stronger, the tone familiar. It was his own voice layered hundreds of times, each echo older, more tired. Images flashed behind his eyes. Him walking through the same woods on different nights, wearing the same clothes, carrying the same fear. He had been here before, again and again, each time forgetting, each time drawn back by the carving. The realization sank deep, cold, and inevitable. The forest didn't remember him because it haunted him. It remembered him because he belonged to it. He was one of its echoes, one of its roots, trying once more to escape the soil that birthed him. He crawled toward the oak again, desperate, trembling. The bark now pulsed faintly, as if aware of his realization. "Let me go," he whispered. The tree's surface shimmered with faint movement, shapes forming beneath it. Fingers, faces, veins of light. Then, a single slit opened, just wide enough to reveal darkness beyond. It wasn't an entrance. It was an invitation. The forest wind returned, carrying a sound like breathing, thousands of lungs inhaling in unison. The message was clear. The forest could only release him by reclaiming him. For the first time, he didn't resist. He pressed his hand into the slit, and the wood yielded like skin. The forest sighed deeply as his arms sank into the living wood. A surge of heat rippled through him, memories spilling open, dozens of lives, all beginning and ending here. His heartbeat aligned with the forest's rhythm until there was no difference between them. The fog grew thicker, spinning in wide circles, folding light in on itself. He could feel the faces in the buried trunk stirring again, reaching for him through the soil. The whispers became a chant. Return, return, return. The oak's bark began to close around his wrist, creeping slowly up his arm. He didn't fight it. He looked up, eyes wet, and smiled faintly. As the tree sealed him in, the forest exhaled once more, long and soft. His body disappeared beneath the shifting wood, the last of him dissolving into roots. The glow faded, leaving only silence and mist. When dawn came, a dawn that might have been hours or centuries later, the clearing looked untouched. Only the faint outline of a handprint remained in the bark, smooth and darkened like an old scar. A crow landed on a nearby branch, watching. The wind stirred again, carrying a whisper, too faint for the living ear. "I remember." And somewhere deep below, the forest pulsed gently, alive, waiting for the next name to carve itself upon its heart. Weeks passed, though time here had no edges. The forest grew thicker, older, quieter. Beyond its borders, a storm rolled over the nearby town, winds sweeping through empty streets and bending telephone wires like reeds. In a small rented cabin, someone new arrived. A traveler seeking solitude, hoping the woods would clear the noise in his head. He unpacked a worn backpack, laid a journal on the table, and paused when he noticed something strange. On the first page, written in unfamiliar handwriting, was a single name. Evan. He frowned. unsure how it got there. Outside, the forest rustled as if exhaling in recognition. Rain fell steadily as Daniel stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the heavy scent of pine and wet earth. The forest seemed harmless, almost inviting in its silence. Yet when he looked toward the tree line, a shape caught his eye. Something tall and dark standing still among the trunks. He blinked, and it was gone. He laughed nervously, brushing it off as imagination. The journal page still bothered him, though, the ink too fresh, as though it had been written moments before he arrived. He ran his fingers over the name again. For a moment, it felt warm. That night, Daniel dreamed of trees breathing, of roots pulsing beneath his bed, of faces shifting under the bark. In the dream, he heard his own voice whispering through the leaves, saying the same word again and again: return. When he awoke, the air inside the cabin felt wrong, thick and damp. He noticed mud on the floorboards leading from the front door to the journal. Its pages fluttered despite the still air, stopping on a blank one. Slowly, letters began to carve themselves into the paper. "I'm still here." His pulse raced. Outside, thunder rolled. The storm raged through the night. Power lines groaned. Windows rattled. And somewhere in the darkness, the forest sang, a low, rhythmic hum that resonated through the ground. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The sound grew louder the closer he got to the tree line. His beam landed on a single tree standing apart from the rest, its bark smoother than the others. Something glistened faintly on its surface. He moved closer, rain plastering his hair to his face. The letters came into focus, freshly carved, the edges still weeping red. His name. Lightning split the sky, bathing the forest in blinding light. For an instant, Daniel saw dozens of figures between the trees. Faces turned toward him, all identical, all whispering his name in perfect unison. He stumbled backward, the beam of his flashlight flailing wildly. The ground beneath him felt alive, rising and falling with unseen breath. When the thunder's echo died, he found himself alone again, the forest calm, almost peaceful. He dropped the flashlight and looked once more at the carving. The red had stopped dripping, but just beneath the surface of his name, faintly visible in the wood grain, another word was beginning to form. Evan. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the woods wrapped in quiet mist. Daniel barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces behind his eyelids, one in particular, faint but familiar, whispering from beneath the roots. He stepped outside, shoes sinking into soaked earth. The carved tree waited for him, its bark pale and wet. Where his name had been the night before, the letters had changed, merging into another. Evan. His pulse quickened. He reached out to touch it, and warmth met his fingers, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat under the surface. He whispered the name aloud without knowing why. The forest seemed to answer with a soft exhale. He couldn't leave. The road that had brought him to the cabin was gone, swallowed by fog thick as stone. His phone died hours ago, its screen flickering with static like an old film reel before darkening completely. He tried shouting, but the forest muted every sound. Then came the whisper, low and familiar, carried on the wind. "You came back." The voice wasn't his, but it wasn't someone else either. He followed it deeper, drawn by something ancient and magnetic. Every tree seemed to lean closer as he passed, their bark etched with shapes he almost recognized. Faces, hundreds of them, all watching. In a hollow clearing, Daniel found the knife, old, rusted, half buried in mud. He picked it up, feeling its weight, sensing a memory that wasn't his. The air trembled with tension, faint whispers curling around him like smoke. The forest's heartbeat began again, slow and immense, vibrating through the ground. He felt something stir beneath the soil, a movement that carried recognition, longing, hunger. Then, in a voice identical to his own from nowhere and everywhere, Finish it. He looked down at the blade, and though his reflection was dim in the steel, another face smiled back. He moved as though guided, every motion rehearsed by someone before him. The clearing felt alive now, breathing under his feet. The tree that bore the carving loomed close, its trunk trembling with faint light beneath the bark. He raised the knife, arms shaking, and for a heartbeat, the world stilled. The sound of rain from the leaves above faded. Every whisper ceased. He saw himself in the bark, not as he was, but as something older, worn, layered in generations of faces. With a final breath, he drove the blade into the tree's heart. Light burst outward, red and gold, flooding the mist. When the light faded, Daniel was gone. Only the oak remained, its surface smooth and unscarred, the soil damp where he once stood. In the cabin miles away, the journal on the table opened by itself, its pages fluttering before settling on a blank one. Slowly, fresh letters carved their way into the paper. Daniel Ward. Beneath it, the faint outline of another name began to form. Evan. Outside, the wind stirred the branches, whispering softly through the forest's endless memory. The cycle had begun again. Quiet, patient, eternal. The woods would wait, as they always did, for the next one to come seeking peace.